Welcome back to Godless and Grounded. Faith is often praised as a virtue, something to be admired, held up as noble, even heroic. In countless religious texts and traditions, faith is seen as the highest form of devotion. But when we look at it closely, stripped of its emotional and cultural attachments, we begin to see something far less inspiring. Faith, by definition, is belief without evidence. In fact, it's belief in spite of the evidence, and that's where the problem lies. Because when you prioritize belief over knowledge, certainty over inquiry, and tradition over truth, you're not just avoiding critical thinking, you're actively suppressing it. Let's start with what intelligence actually means. Intelligence isn't just about IQ scores or solving math problems. It's about your ability to reason, to question, to think critically, to assess evidence, and to change your views when the facts demand it. It's about curiosity and adaptability. Now, think about faith. Faith asks you not to question. It tells you that the answers are already known. It warns you that doubt is dangerous and that questioning sacred truths is a moral failure. In many religious traditions, doubt is even framed as a sin. So, what happens when we elevate faith as a virtue while dismissing doubt, which is the very engine of intelligence? Let's be clear. Faith is not the same as trust. Trust is earned. You trust a friend because they've shown you they're reliable. You trust a pilot because you know they've been trained, tested, and certified. But faith doesn't ask for evidence. It demands loyalty in the absence of it. In fact, the less evidence there is, the more some people consider faith to be pure. It becomes a badge of honor to believe in things precisely because they can't be proven. But is that really something to celebrate? Imagine a scientist trying to cure a disease. If they relied on faith rather than evidence, they'd be guessing, not experimenting. They'd be praying instead of testing hypotheses, and that's not how breakthroughs happen. Penicillin wasn't discovered through faith. Rockets weren't launched into orbit by people who believed blindly. Vaccines weren't created by men and women who thought evidence was optional. The progress of humanity, in medicine, in technology, in ethics, has been driven by reason, not revelation. Now, consider this. Faith teaches you to be content with not knowing. It says, this is the truth. You don't need to question it. But intelligence thrives on asking questions. It says, I don't know. And that's why I need to learn more. Faith locks the doors. Intelligence kicks them open. Faith stops the conversation. Intelligence keeps it going. Let's take a real-world example. For centuries, people believed, based on faith, that the Earth was the center of the universe. It felt right. The sun rose in the east and set in the west. Everything seemed to revolve around us. That belief was tied deeply into religious doctrine. To question it wasn't just bad science, it was heresy. When Copernicus and Galileo proposed a heliocentric model, that the Earth revolves around the sun, they weren't just contradicting faith-based beliefs. They were challenging the very foundation of religious authority. And for that, they faced intense persecution. Galileo was forced to recant. His writings were banned, all because he used intelligence where others preferred faith. And it's not just ancient history. In today's world, faith continues to obstruct progress. Think about how many people reject climate science, not because of lack of evidence, but because it conflicts with their faith-based worldview. Or how some deny evolution, not because the fossil record is lacking, but because a sacred text says otherwise. Or how certain groups oppose life-saving medical procedures like blood transfusions or vaccines, simply because they believe a divine command forbids them. These aren't just abstract beliefs. These are decisions that affect lives, real people, real suffering, real consequences, and all because faith told them to ignore what science and reason have made abundantly clear. This doesn't mean that people who have faith are unintelligent. Intelligence isn't about what you believe. It's about how you believe it. Plenty of intelligent people are religious. But when someone suspends their critical thinking in order to maintain their faith, they are, in that moment, choosing belief over reason. And that's what makes faith incompatible with intelligence. Not because it's always wrong, but because it refuses to admit when it is. Faith also distorts the way we evaluate morality. In many religious systems, morality isn't based on harm, justice, or fairness. It's based on obedience. You're told what is right and what is wrong by a holy book or a spiritual leader. You're expected to follow rules not because they make sense, but because they're divinely ordained. That's not moral reasoning. That's moral outsourcing. It's the suspension of ethical thinking in favor of blind submission. And when you apply that kind of thinking to real-world problems, like women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, or scientific ethics, you often get answers that are outdated, unjust, and deeply irrational. Take the case of slavery. Many religious texts not only condone it, but lay out rules for how to conduct it. For centuries, people used scripture to justify owning other human beings, and many did so in good faith, literally. It took reason, humanism, and moral philosophy, not faith, to recognize that slavery is a fundamental violation of human rights. It took questioning sacred texts, not blindly following them. Faith also discourages intellectual humility. When you believe something because you've reasoned your way to it, you're open to revising your view if new evidence comes along. But when you believe something because God said so, there's no room for change. That kind of certainty can be intoxicating and dangerous. It breeds arrogance, not wisdom. And it's precisely the kind of mindset that leads to extremism. When people are absolutely certain they're doing God's will, they become capable of anything, including violence, oppression, and the silencing of dissent. In contrast, intelligence thrives on uncertainty. The smartest people aren't those who claim to have all the answers. They're the ones who know how little they know and who keep asking questions anyway. That humility is what fuels discovery, empathy, and growth. It's what allows societies to evolve beyond old prejudices and superstitions. And yet, faith often mocks this uncertainty. It labels it as weakness. It says, "Why are you still asking questions? Don't you trust the answers you've already been given?" But this pressure to stop questioning is precisely what holds humanity back. Progress is born from doubt, not from dogma. Even the way faith treats death is telling. Most religious faiths offer some form of afterlife, a promise that death isn't the end. And while that idea might be comforting, it also discourages people from fully engaging with the reality of their lives. If this world is just a test, why invest in improving it? If justice will be served in the next life, why fight for it now? But intelligence tells us that this life, this brief, fragile moment, is all we know for sure. And that makes it infinitely valuable. It pushes us to cherish it, protect it, and make it better. Not because we expect a reward, but because it matters here and now. Let's not pretend faith is harmless. While many use it for personal comfort, countless others have used it to justify violence, war, discrimination, and cruelty. From holy wars to inquisitions, from honor killings to anti-science dogmas, faith has often been wielded as a weapon against reason. And the more blind the faith, the more brutal the consequences. Intelligence, on the other hand, is what leads us to question these actions, to reflect, to understand their impact, and to build systems that reduce suffering. Faith also often relies on emotional manipulation. People are taught to believe under pressure, from their families, their communities, and even themselves. They're told they'll be punished if they don't believe, that their eternal soul is at stake, that they'll be separated from their loved ones. These are not rational arguments, they're emotional threats. Imagine being told that your belief in gravity or evolution will send you to hell. That's the kind of logic we accept when faith goes unquestioned. Intelligence demands a different kind of courage. The courage to think for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. The courage to say, "I don't know," rather than pretend you do. The courage to challenge ideas that no longer make sense, even if they're ancient or sacred. It's not easy to let go of beliefs you were raised with. It's not easy to stand against the crowd, but that's what intelligence sometimes requires, not just to be smart, but to be honest. Faith often asks you to silence your inner skeptic. Intelligence encourages you to listen to it. Faith demands certainty. Intelligence embraces doubt. Faith clings to tradition. Intelligence moves forward, and most importantly, faith accepts things without question. But intelligence knows that questions are where understanding begins. So when we say that faith is the opposite of intelligence, it's not an insult. It's a reflection of how they operate. One thrives in darkness. The other seeks the light. One says, just believe. The other says, let's find out. And if we want to build a better world, one that values truth over tradition, evidence over emotion, and curiosity over certainty, then it's time we started listening more to the voice of intelligence and a little less to the whispers of faith.